this computer in the where's my share button? Come on.
Not in the picture yet. Okay.
Why can't I share the source sheet?
Oh.
Share, here it is. All right. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it zoomed in enough?
Shemini.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So we're Parshat Shemini. Parshat Shemini is it's really a parsha with two distinct pieces to it. The first is the description of Yom HaShmini, the eighth day.
Okay, that's fair.
Referring to the day of the dedication of the Mishkan. It begins with describing the special sacrifices that Aaron brought in order to we spend many times from many perspectives looking at the dedication, the consecration of the Mishkan. So this is really, I think, the final one. And so Aaron is offers the special sacrifices, the special ceremony, and we're ready to get on with normal life, except that we then encounter the tragic deaths of Nadav and Avihu, of Aaron's sons. In previous years, we explored different approaches to understanding what they did wrong, what was the cause of their death. Was it a punishment? Was it something else? You can go back to the YouTube channel and find the recording if you want to be reminded about some of those. And then in the second half of the Parsha, also you can go to the YouTube page and find what we did about, I think last year we spoke about the second half of the Parsha, which is about laws of kashrus, and specifically animals and birds that are kosher and not kosher. So it's a very stark contrast, part one and part two. We're going to stay in part one for tonight. And we're really going to focus on our parsha on one pasuk, or one piece of that story, that narrative of the final act of consecration of the Mishkan. And then we're going to go back to earlier on in Sefer Vayikra to see where the same idea might be might present itself as well. So with that, let's get into it. We're going to pick up chapter 9, verse 7. So this is Yom HaShmini, the eighth day. Aaron is told the special sacrifices to bring. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, Krav el HaMizbeach, Va'aseh et chatatcha v'et olatecha, v'chaper ba'adcha v'ad ha'am, Va'aseh et korban ha'am, v'chiper ba'adam kasher tziva Hashem. Moshe tells Aaron, Krav el HaMizbeach, approach or come close to the altar and offer up your sin offering and your elevation offering, and atone for yourself and for the nation, and do the sacrifice of the nation and atone for them as God has commanded. So Rashi and the other commentators pick up on what seems to be a strange verb that Moshe uses in addressing Aaron. Krav el hamizbeach. Approach the mizbeach, approach the altar, come close. Why does Moshe have to tell Aaron to come close? So Rashi tells us, Shahaya Aharon Bush. Aaron was ashamed or diffident, as the translation here has. V'yarei lageshet. He was afraid to approach. Amarlo Moshe. So Moshe says to him, Lama tabosh, what are you ashamed of? L'kach nivcharta. You were chosen for this very task. Why are you, God said Aaron's going to be the Kohen Gadol. Aaron is going to be the one to bring the sacrifices on behalf of the people. This is your job. What are you doing being afraid or being lacking the confidence to do what it is that God told you to do. So one understanding of this is brought by Rabbi Sachs in number 3. We don't need all the details. I think we're all familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome,
Mm.
right? That Aaron somehow felt that he was an imposter in this unfolding drama of the Mishkan, that he didn't feel worthy, that he felt that he was not up to the task. And so maybe Aaron needed that sort of gentle nudge or not so gentle nudge from Moshe to tell him that you have no reason to to feel that you're unworthy of the task because God singled you out for the task. This is what you're supposed to do. That's one possibility. The Ramban elaborates. The Ramban brings the Midrashim, which Rashi, sort of just quotes one line from, but the Ramban gives us a fuller picture. The Ramban says, and if I need to scroll down more in the English, someone please tell me when it's time to do that. Tam krav el hamizbeach. So we're right at the very top. Vaykrav Aaron el mizbeach vayishchatz al da'ati v'derech hapshat yomar krav el tzfon hamizbeach. So the Ramban says, first let's just answer this on a very simple pshat, straightforward level. When Moshe says krav el hamizbeach, that's his shorthand for saying these sacrifices that you're about to offer should be given on the northern corner of the mizbeach, of the altar, which is the section which was closest to where they were standing. So krav, it's a very, it's a short step. It's a short trip. It's you don't have to go to the far side. You can just, it's just krav. Vasei sham chatat ve'ola, kihem shchitatam mitzafon, because these are offered in the north, and that's so krav just means go to the closer side. V'amar Moshe came b'derech tzara, instead of saying go to the north, Moshe said krav. I don't know if one is shorter than the other, but the Ramban says this was their shorthand. Okay. Shekvar yada Aaron. Aaron really knew where they were supposed to be offered. He just needed a gentle reminder or whatever. Aval. But now this is the second approach in the Ramban. B'torat Kohanim, he quotes the Sifra, the Midrash Halacha and Vayikra. Nit'oru rabotenu bazeh. Our rabbis were curious, were troubled by this. Umashlu mashal lemahadavar domer, and they gave the following analogy. What is this similar to? Lemelech basar vadam shenasa isha. It's analogous to a human king who takes a wife, v'hayata mitbayeshet milfanav, and she was ashamed in front of him. Nichnesa etzla achota, her sister comes to her, amrala achoti lama nichnast lidavar zeh. Lo shetim shamshia tamelech, and her sister comes to her and says, why did you get married? Isn't it so that you can serve the king? Hagisi dateich uboi shamshiyat melech. So get your stuff together and go serve the king. So I think the way that this is supposed to be read is probably in a sexual way, that the queen, the new bride is modest, is ashamed, embarrassed to have physical relations with the king, and her sister has to give her the talk. But it can be read in a more general term. You don't think that you can serve as queen, but this is what you have to do. So I think both readings are plausible and probably both are implied here. But that's the mashal. That's the analogy. The nimshal, the application to our story. Kach amar lo Moshe le'Aharon, Aharon achi. So too Moshe says to Aaron, my brother, Lama nivcharta liot Kohen Gadol. Why were you chosen to be the Kohen Gadol? Lo shetisharet lifnei hamakom. Isn't it so that you can serve God? Hagestatcha ubo vavod avoda. So therefore, I don't know how to translate. How's the English have hagestatcha? Embolden yourself. Embolden yourself. Get
What's
your
in the
stuff
Hebrew?
together. Don't and go do the service that you're meant to do. Okay, so again, it could be the focusing on the public role of it. It could be just feeling the inadequacy of it. It could be this sense of modesty. Who am I? Whatever it is, Moshe says you've got to get over it. You've got to go and serve God because God obviously thinks you're up to the task. If God thinks you're up to the task, that's the best sign that you're up to the task. Number 3 in the Ramban. V'yesh
Let's
omrim.
go.
Yep.
Others,
Where are
other
we now?
scholars explain. Other
Uh,
scholars explain down 4 line. Yeah, right there.
okay. Yesh omrim. Others say, Haya Aaron ro'et hamizbeach ki tavnit shor. That Aaron looked at the mizbeach, he looked at the altar, and he saw a bull. The altar to him looked like a cow.
Mm-hmm.
Vaya mityareh mimenu, and he was afraid of it. Right, so we know that the mizbeach has keren, has a horn, so maybe that's where it's coming from. But he sees a bull and he is afraid. Nichnas Moshe etzel amar lo Aaron achi lo tira mimasha ata mityareh. Moshe comes to him and says, Aaron, my brother, don't be afraid of whatever it is you're afraid of. Hagestatcha ubo crave elav. Embolden yourself, get yourself together, and go approach the Mizbeach. The Kachamar krav el Mizbeach, and that's why it says, it uses this strange verb of krav, approach, and immediately in the next pasuk it says, Vayikrav el Mizbeach, that Aaron did it, bizrizut. He did it once he got over his initial fear, he did it with enthusiasm. Yutam davar zeh, ki ba'avor shaya Aaron kadosh Hashem. Okay, so that's the Midrash says that Aaron saw this image of a bull and he was afraid. Now the Ramban tries to psychologize what Aaron was thinking. Vitam davar zeh, the reason for this, ki ba'avor shaya Aaron kadosh Hashem. Aaron, as we know, was a very holy man. Ve'ein b'nafsho chet zulati ma'aseh ha'egel. The only sin he had committed. I don't know if this literally means the only sin or the only sin that maybe would render him unfit or that would continue to trouble him, was his involvement in the chet ha'egel, in the sin of the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
And so he became super obsessed with this one sin that he had committed. Kinyan shne'emar v'chatati negdi tamid. As it says in Tehillim chapter 51, v'chatati negdi tamid, my sin is always in front of me. Aaron couldn't escape it. He couldn't get over it. Haya nidmelo ki ilu tsurata egel sham me'akev b'chaparotav. So why does he see it as an egel, as a cow or a bull? Because the image of the bull is what prevents Aaron from ever achieving kapara, from ever achieving atonement, from ever being worthy of offering sacrifices, let alone on behalf of the nation, even on behalf of himself. And that's why Moshe tells him, embolden yourself. You're being overly modest. You're being too modest. Okay? Everyone sins. Everyone makes a mistake, and we do atonement, and we get over it. Aaron, you've got to be able to get over it. Don't be so modest. Don't be so humble to think that your sin is the only sin that can't be forgiven. Shekvar Ratza Elokim et Masav, right? And Moshe says, God has already accepted you. Again, right? The same idea. God has already deemed you to be worthy. You've just got to see yourself as being worthy. I think we're up to number 4. Acherim mefarshim, Shayah Satan Mar Elokim. Others say that this was the Satan. This was the Yetzer Hara, troubling or playing with Aaron. Shema Yastincha B'viatcha L'Mikdash, V'chule, right? That the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, is somehow causing Aaron to have this fear. So then the Ramban concludes, V'ta'am v'chaper ba'atcha uva'ad ha'am. The reason why Moshe tells Aaron, approach the Mizbeach and atone for yourself and for the nation. Yomar krav el hamizbeach lasot kol hakorbanot. Says go approach the altar to offer all the sacrifices. Va'asei techila et chatatcha vot olotecha. First offer your sin offering and your elevation offering. V'chaper ba'atcha tchila. First atone for yourself b'korbanatcha uva'ad ha'am acharechen. First atone for yourself with your sacrifices, and then on behalf of the nation. Shatase korban ha'am v'chaper ba'adam b'korbanam. Right, then you'll after your personal sacrifices, then you'll offer the national sacrifices and atone for them. Mamedo toshiavo zakai v'chaper al chayav. So right, we need someone who is zakai, someone who's meritorious, to be the one to achieve atonement for those who are still guilty. So Aaron first has to atone for himself, and then he can be the worthy representative of the nation. There's a lot going on in this Ramban. Any questions or reactions to what he has to say?
I think that when he saw the bull or the cow, it was a flitting thing that popped into his mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just, we all get things like that. It just was a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And so and then they make a big thing out of it. Or he makes, I don't know, but
Yeah.
but it could be, yeah. But I think that it could be realistically, it could be just this tiny little image popped into his mind.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, right, just he sees the Karen, the horn, the corner piece of the Mizbeach, and that reminds him, or he has some fleeting image. Yeah, that could very well be.
I found the conversation with Moshe and Aaron just fascinating. There's a lot about the psychology of shame that's been written lately.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful book that I'm looking forward to getting a hold of. I know someone in the shul who has read it and recommends it highly. Sarah Yehudis Schneider's book on the Kabbalah of guilt and shame.
Huh.
Its title of it is The Dark Matters of the Soul, Guilt and Shame.
Wow.
But one of the major points in that book, if I understood just what I've read on Amazon about it, I mean, they give you a chance to look at the table of contents and at some of those footnotes, and Aaron is mentioned in one of those footnotes I found. But there's always a little problem with narcissism standing right nearby the sense of shame or guilt. And that's what Moshe was addressing, I think, when he said, don't, as you said, don't be overly modest.
Right.
And it is, that dynamic itself is so fascinating because a guilt or shame is, according to this understanding, is an attempt to protect the ego. The ego feels threatened and therefore tries to protect itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a real basic problem with a lack of proper humility. It leads, of course, in that direction as well. But this book really sounds fascinating. If anybody's interested in the references, the website she has is A Still Soft Voice.
Maybe you could,
a still soft voice. Yeah. Excuse me.
Maybe you could send it to us in the email, just like reply to that email that the rabbi sends or something. We could we'll have that info. I was gonna say I found there's two things I was thinking. The line that like Rambam starts off by saying that the reason why Moshe says it so briefly is because Art already knew all this stuff, right?
Right.
So it's like, all right, let's go. Like we've been talking about the Mishkan and we've been teaching you all these things. So like, all right, it's time to perform, right? And so Rambam doesn't have a problem with the language, but then goes and still brings all of the parables, right? The lessons that are relevant to us. So it doesn't have to be that Aaron was afraid. It is a truth in human nature that, like, in every single one of these things that he's saying, like, that one sin that you have is always stuck in your mind, right? Or there's always that one sin that's stuck in your mind. You might have committed more, but there's that one that you kind of like traumatizes you, or you see it. Um, and so, like, I just like that piece where Rambam is in some ways he's saying, I'm going with pshat, but like I think it's really important also to take a look at all these midrashim because they have important lessons for us, right? And
Uh-huh.
so we can't ignore them. The other thing that been wanting to say all along is just like the irony of Moshe coaching Aaron
Mm.
that he's enough, right? Like that's Moshe and Per Gimel, or right? Like that's this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so is there a karev over there in terms of the sneh? Or is it
Um,
Hagisha? I'll look, I'll
no,
look.
Vayar Hashem ki sar lirot. Asura nava ere mare hagadol hazeh.
Right.
I don't think there's krav.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I just found that to be like a tremendous irony, or not, right? Like Moshe has been through it, and Moshe knows that if Hashem says you could do the job,
Mm.
you could do the job.
Yeah, right.
Agree.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, any other thoughts on this? Okay, so Arthur, just to your point, Rabbeinu Bachya sort of gives us what I guess we would call the Rashi on the Ramban.
Mhm. Mhm.
But so in number three here, he says what I think you were trying to get at, which is that just spells it out in case it was, I think that the Ramban could be read in a few different ways here, but the Rabbeinu Bachya says, Katav Ramban, Ena Kavanah b'midrash hazeh shaya ro'ed mizbeach tavnit shor, doesn't mean that he literally saw an image of a bull on the Mizbeach, aval ha'inyan ki avon lo haya biyado, avon acher zulati avon ha'egel, but rather was all in his mind because he had this one sin that was
Mhm.
preoccupying him.
Mm.
It was all in his mind. It wasn't that there was
Mhm.
literally an image of a cow or something that it was all internal. So he just spells that out a bit more.
So
Okay.
what's in his mind is identified by the visual.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. So I heard two really interesting takes on this that I was not able to get the sources in the original. So you're going to have to take my word on it, or someone can search. It's not on Safaria, so you'll have to look in
Mhm.
Hebrew books or elsewhere, which isn't as easy to search. The first is from the Or Yahel, and he makes the point to say that from this real or imagined dialogue and reluctance of Aaron HaKohen, what we should learn is to have more shame. That, you know, yeah, Aaron has to get over it. That's true. But many times, and I don't know if this is more true in our day and age with whatever the current trends in psychology are, but many times we're very quick to find excuses or to move on with things without living with the shame, without letting the shame
Mhm.
be a real force in our life. So he says that no, what we should get from this is that there is a point to having this shame and embarrassment, and that sometimes we shouldn't be overly quick to forgive ourselves or to forgive others, but that if we really did do something bad, we should feel badly about it, and that should be something which bothers us. Again, I don't know what modern day therapists would say about this, but that's the point that he makes. The Maharam Shik says no, exactly the opposite, that we should really focus in on Moshe's role in this midrash, in this story, and that we really should um, take from this the fact that even if we have done egregious sins, and even if we do feel tremendous guilt, and even if that guilt is If it's something that we should be feeling, nonetheless, we need to not allow ourselves to be paralyzed by it. And that's a point that many make, and I think that's certainly in line with modern day psychology. That yes, we should feel guilty, we should feel bad, but we can't allow the guilt to paralyze us. We can't allow ourselves to be so caught up in it that we can't do the task at hand.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think there's truth to both of those. The Sfat Emet says two really important things. So the first that he says is he also, I think, playing with this tension about what is healthy guilt, healthy shame, and when does it go too far. So he quotes right Rashi that Aaron was ashamed to approach the Mizbeach. Yesh liomod shekach tzarich liot adam bush mitzad atzmo. A person should have a sense of shame and a sense of embarrassment. If you've done something wrong, that is an appropriate thing to carry with you. Af al pikein yitkarev el hamitzvah mikoach tzivui shel Hashem yitbarach shelakachno nivchar. And despite the fact that someone bears guilt and bears shame, they nonetheless should go and do the mitzvah which God has told them to do. Because that's ultimately L'kach nivchar. This is why we were chosen. This is why we were created. This is why we exist on earth. Ki bevadai busha zu haya karui. Of course, Aaron was right to feel ashamed and to feel embarrassed. Ki Aaron hayat tzaddik v'lo haya bo chisron midah. Aaron was a righteous man. He wasn't lacking for anything. Ach gam zeg davar gadol. And despite the fact that he carried this great shame, it's a great thing. She'al yadei she'amar lo krav, ketiv miyad vayikrav. As soon as Moshe told him, krav, approach, as soon as Moshe gave him that patent, that excuse, that nudge to get over the initial shame, he did it. He went forth with the task at hand, and he didn't allow himself to get paralyzed and not do anything. Zeh siman shaya busha shel emet. And this is what the Sfat Emet says, I'll translate as authentic shame or proper shame. Klal hadvarim, and the general principle is busha v'da'aga shel emet eino mivi lidei atzavut ve'eino mivi lidei mini'ah ba'avodat Hashem. Authentic shame and worry does not bring one to sadness or depression. Rather, and it doesn't cause any deficiency in one's service of God. V'od mevi achar kach simcha. And even more so, it ultimately leads to joy. K'moshe katav simchati mitoch yirati v'yirati mitoch simchati. As it says that my joy comes as a result of my fear, and my fear comes as a result of my joy. And we have to have this sort of what the Muslim masters always talk about, right? In one pocket to carry the note that you're dust and you're going to return to dust. You come from nothing. You're ultimately going to be nothing. And on the other pocket to carry the note, Yisraeli Nivra Haolam, the world was created for me, and we have to live in this balance. So the Sfat Emet says that that what's being taught at this crucial moment is the message of or the definition of appropriate or authentic shame, which does lead to which can lead to very positive outcomes.
One of the nice things about that note that I found in Sarah Yehuda Schneider is that it is based on another pasuk in Shemini, and that is Aaron's reaction to Moshe's problem with them not eating the sin offering of the day, and all
Right.
of that
Right.
conversation. So that's chapter 10, verse 3, in case anybody wants to look at it, because the second last word is Vayidom Aharon, which is usually translated probably as Aaron was silent. But the spelling of the word Vayidom, you may have noticed this before. It's not. It could be spelled with D Cholam Vav, Vav and the Cholam both, and Mem, but there's only a little dot up above. In other words, the Vav is not there.
Right.
So that when one looks at the word, one sees the word for blood, dam, very easily. And that is seen as a good sign. In other words, he was able to allow himself to feel shame, his face turning red, at what Moshe had said to him, but he had learned how to pull back on the negative side of his ego and assert the positive side by remaining silent. He didn't try to protest. He didn't try to come up with a rejoinder that much. I mean, he said one thing. We've done everything except for this one part. And notice the one part was a sin offering also, It's really interesting that connection is there too, but she didn't notice that. But anyway, I just noticed that.
Right.
But
That's interesting. She reads that episode as Aaron having shame at that point.
yes, but the right kind of shame.
Uh-huh.
And
I would have read it as his face turned red with anger.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean that's how I read that point, that episode in the story, that Aaron or that's when that's when he sort of lets the emotions go. Says, what else, what do you want from me? I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Let me have at least a little bit of mourning. But anyway, it's a night, whether it's shame or anger, that the Vayidom indicates, the appearance of blood is really interesting.
She said, rarely do people realize that Aaron really did get over his experience with the golden calf, and here's one of the proofs of it. So that's why she wanted to bring that.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Maybe,
Yes.
and this should be our next book club.
Yeah.
You've got to read it first and then make sure it's worthwhile for the rest of us.
Yeah. It's not, I know it's not going to be the sort of thing that everybody in the show would like to read or anything like that, but I absolutely feel I must go through it because it's just too intriguing and too important. It's one of those really difficult sets of emotions to deal with for everyone. So,
yeah. Okay. Second reading of the Sfat Emet on the next page. And this, I cut it short. I just wanted to really focus in. The pasuk Krav el Mizbeach, in the verse where Moshe tells Aaron approach the altar. Piresh Rashi Lama Tabosh Lekachna Nivcharta. Rashi says, why are you embarrassed? This is why you were chosen. Upershu Amifarshim, the commentators, he doesn't tell us which commentators say. Lekach Nivcharta Hoil Vi'ata Bush. You were chosen because you are ashamed.
Yeah, that's a good
the
one.
The fact that Aaron is troubled by his role in the Cheta Egel, the fact that he has internalized it so much to the point that he thinks he's not worthy, that's what makes him worthy of being Aaron HaKohen. If he didn't have that sense of shame and that embarrassment, then he would not have been Aaron HaKohen. So, right, the fact that he feels the shame is a sign that he's worthy of being in this position that he's in. Avi doesn't love it, huh?
I just need it to be a little bit less like, what's that word that we say for childish? But like, it's infantilizing a little bit. Right? Like because people feel ashamed. There's nothing special about Aaron for feeling ashamed about sinning.
Right.
So like I don't see it as such a tremendous virtue. Maybe like I think like I'm reading it actually in the sense of like part of what makes Aaron a good choice is that he's learned the lesson, right? and it stays with him. That shame stays with him,
Yeah.
and so like you could throw him out and bring in someone new, but they're also going to make all of their mistakes, right? And so Aaron has sort of now been primed for this, where he's already sort of possibly fallen short when it comes to what he was supposed to do, and that's what makes him perfect to take on this task, was because he actually, experience is experience whether you're successful or not. And somebody that's never done it it's much more of a I think it's much more of a risk than somebody who did it once, got it wrong, and learned from the mistake. That's just me. That's the only part I had with it. It's like, oh, he's ashamed. Like nobody else in B'nai Yisrael was ashamed.
Okay. I
That's
hear
all.
that. Okay.
I
Okay.
respect Sven, and I'm not gonna, it's just a gut reaction.
I hear it. Okay. I wanted to go back to Parshat Vayikra. Parshat Vayikra, it's a very long passage here. Really, all of chapter 4 is describing the chatat, the sin offering.
Mm.
So a chatat is generally a sin offering which is brought when someone commits an avera by mistake, when you accidentally do something wrong. Um, Throughout chapter 4, when it gives the various types of sin offerings for different groups of people, different levels of whatever the different permutations of it are, there's two things that repeat themselves over and over again. The first, I'll read it, I'll give you the English, I'll tell you which verses I'm reading in. Yeah, we can go to the next page here. In verse 24, so the first verse on the top of that sheet, that's on the screen. Samach yado arosh ha'sa'ir, v'shachat oto bimkom asher yishchat et ha'olah. So one thing about the sin offering is we're always told that it's offered in the same place that the olah, that the elevation offering is brought. And that repeats itself in verse 32. In there's one other place. It repeats itself many times. And then the other interesting thing that repeats itself over and over again, back in verse 26, so you offer the fats of the animal on the mizbeach, just like the fats of the shlamim, of the peace offering. The Kohen will atone him from his sin, and he will be forgiven. If you go to verse 35, right, again with the fats, and you'll burn them. The Kohen will atone him for the sin that he has transgressed, and he will be forgiven. And then again in verse, I guess it's into chapter 5, verse 10. The Kohen will atone him from the sin which he has transgressed, and he will be forgiven. Okay, so this phrase repeats itself over and over again. Mechatato asher chata, or al chatato. I don't know if there's a difference of mechatato and al chatato. Maybe that'll be next year's Parsha Shir. If I remember to be disturbed by it, then I'll see if there's anything to say about it. But if you go back now to verse 31, verse 31, hopefully it's highlighted on your screens now. In verse 31, it says, all of the fats will be removed, and you'll be burnt, and there'll be a pleasant smell. And the Kohen will atone for him, and he will be forgiven. The Netziv notes that it's not an exact parallel to what we saw previously. The Netziv notes, Kan lo ketiv mechatato. Here, it doesn't say that he will be atoned from his sin. It just says that he will be atoned. Okay, as it says elsewhere. Hainu mishum shekibel alav delichseif nafshe. The reason is that in this instance, we'll get into that he wants to feel embarrassed. The lichseif nafshe. He wants to feel embarrassed. He wants to feel shame. What's this talking about? So the Netziv points us to the Gemara in Sota. The Gemara in Sota, doesn't matter how it gets to this conversation, but it gets to conversation and it asks the question, why in shul do we say a silent Amida and a Chazrat Hashatz, a public out loud recitation of the Amida? Why is there the silent Amida? So picking up in the middle of this source, Gufa Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Where in the English is this? Yes. Okay, so let me scroll down. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, why did the sages institute that we should say a silent Amida, a silent prayer? Because what does a person do when they're saying the Amida? Right, this is before there's a sitter, before there was 20, Art Scroll and Koren and Birnbaum and all the other ones, right? When a person went to shul, they would say what was on their mind, and they would use the opportunity, and hopefully we still do this, but they would say their sins, they would confess their sins and ask Hashem for forgiveness, or try to work through how they can correct it. So the rabbi said that such a thing shouldn't be said out loud, because that's embarrassing, right? Why should a person embarrass themselves by sharing with the whole shul what they need to ask God forgiveness for? Right? So, and the proof for this is because of our psukim that we just saw, that the Torah over and again tells us that the chatat, the sin offering, has to be given in the same place as the ola offering, as the elevation offering. Why? Read between the lines. So that if there's other people in the Beis Hamikdash, when I bring my sin offering, they won't know that I'm bringing a sin offering. There's just a good a chance that I'm bringing an ola, an elevation offering, which is brought out of a moment of great religious inspiration. So in order to not have to make it known that Rabbi Kaplowitz committed some great sin that requires him to bring a special sacrifice for it, we offer it in the same place as the Ola, so no one has to know my business. I can keep it between me and Hashem. Maybe the Kohen Gadol has to know, but the Kohen on duty, but no one else has to know. The Gemara says, well, wait a second. That's very nice, but ha'ika damim, the way that the blood is sprinkled for the chatat and the ola is different. There's different rules about how the blood is sprinkled. Dam chatat lamala, dam ola lamata, hatam kohen hu diyada. Okay, so the kohen has to know. Your therapist has to know. Your doctor has to know what's going on with you, but no one else has to know. Right? You're not going to be totally anonymous, but very few people have to know. Well, there's another glaring difference between the two sacrifices, because the chatat is a female animal and the ola is a male animal. Hatam miksa ba'alya. Well, even though there is a difference between male and female, the difference is covered up by the animal's tail. Again, no one standing 20, 30 feet away has to know if I'm giving a female or a male animal, because it's covered by the tail. So they don't have to know. Tenach kifsa seira ma'ika lememar. Okay, well that works for a lamb, but if they're right, you have the choice of giving a lamb or a goat. If they're giving a goat, then there is no tail that's going to cover it up. So what are you going to say in that place? Hatam ihu deka machsif nafshe. There, the person chooses to bring a goat, to bring an animal that's going to make it known to everyone else what what the reason for the korban is. There's a way out. You don't have to publicly shame yourself, but if you choose to, okay, so there's nothing I can do for you in that case. He could have brought a sheep and he chose to bring a goat. That's the basic point. And the Netziv then points us to one more Gemara in Brachot, which tells us, Amar Rabba Bar Chanina Saba Mishmei Rav, Kol ha'oseh davar avera umitbayesh bo. If someone commits a sin and is embarrassed by it or is shamed by it, mochalin lo al kol avonotav, and then they are forgiven for all of their sins. And Steve says, right again, that there is a positive role that busha, that shame, that embarrassment plays. If a person is willing to go there, there are some people who, and I think you were getting at this, there's a very fine line between when this is healthy and productive and when this can be paralyzing and unhealthy and counterproductive. There's a very fine line. But that there is a place for busha, there is a place for, right, what the Sfat Emet calls busha shel emet, authentic or proper shame or embarrassment, which can lead to very positive things. So I think I think that this is expressing similar ideas that we find with Aaron and Moshe in our parsha, that there is a role for positive uses of busha, of shame. Again, it shouldn't be something which is paralyzing and debilitating to a person. And unfortunately, there are many people that do get paralyzed and debilitated by the shame that they feel, real or imagined. And that's not healthy psychologically, that's not healthy spiritually, that's not healthy religiously. We should be able to find ways to work through it. But the feeling of shame in itself can be a very positive force in order to bring about that proper healing and that proper tikkun. So
one thing, it helps a person to be more compassionate and patient with other people.
It could, and again, hopefully,
it could lead in that direction.
It could lead in that direction, and that's the direction we hope it does lead in. It's a dangerous message. It's because there are too many people that aren't able to overcome it, or aren't able to overcome it in a healthy way, aren't able to get over it. But it's a fine line, and I think it's a very honest and realistic approach to understanding these forces that appear in our lives, whether wanted or unwanted, and hopefully gives us opportunity to reflect on it and hopefully to use it in that positive way.
These are thoughts that can be practiced or studied before Yom Kippur,
for sure, for sure, right? The role of busha, the role of shame and embarrassment in shuva is very powerful.
Rabbi, I was just like, because you brought in brachot and it finally clicked in my head that like boshet and busha, right? Like these are halachic conversations. Like if you injure somebody, right, you might have to pay for boshet for embarrassment that you caused to the person. Isn't there like kefal dalid vehe, like if you're carrying the animal or something like that you've stolen, that you pay less for a lamb or something like that because you have to carry the lamb on your shoulders, so it like you only have to pay 4. But so I'm just thinking like we're talking about busha and mitbayesh as like as an emotional thing, but ultimately it shows up in our halacha as like sort of currency, you might say. And that like if I do something and I'm embarrassed, not simply like I'm embarrassed that I did it wrong, but like it happened to be I did something wrong in front of so many people, and vayidom, my face turns red, right? Like that's like part of this kapara, right? So so it's like I just to add that, right? Like it's not necessarily I reflected on it for 45 days and I'm embarrassed, but like maybe it's an in the moment thing where you've done something bad and you felt such great shame in the moment, maybe simply because it was in public and you got caught, I wonder how that works in terms of kapara.
Yeah, that's a good Bitzarich
Yeah, yeah.
You've left us with something to think about and
Well, you
to
started,
further
you
explore.
just gave me something to think about. So I
Okay.
appreciate it for sure.
All right. All right, it's good to be back. I hope everyone had a wonderful Pesach and to be
And
continued.
Sphira, are you going to count
There's
Sphira before we go?
um
Put you on the spot, right?
put me on the spot.
I'm pulling up my Hebkav right now.
Sure. You want to do it, Avi?
אז ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם אשר קידשנו ותודה וציוונו על ספירת העומר, והיום 10 ימים שהם שבוע אחד ו3 ימים לעומר.
All
תפארת
right.
שבגבורה,
Amazing.
beauty within might.
Yasher Koach. Lots of learning happening these days. Avi had a very amazing, successful inaugural Kolel Haklal session last night.
Yes.
And anyone that wants to join that moving forward, Monday evenings, I'm sure
Thanks.
I speak for Avi when I say that we would love to see you there.
The more the merrier, for
The more
sure.
the merrier. Beginning this Shabbos afternoon, we're going to be beginning the annual 6-week adventure of Pirkei Avot in the afternoon, preceding Mincha. And Parsha Shir will be back here next week. Have a
Wow.
wonderful rest of the week. Bye, Latov.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Mhm.